Good afternoon. I'm John Falchicchio, Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, and on behalf of Mayor Bowser, thank you for joining us for today's DMPED Teletownhall. Today we're going to talk about the vaccine requirement, which goes into effect on Saturday, January 15th at 6 a.m. So I'm joined by a few guests who are going to help us talk through the vaccine requirement and what that means for our businesses that are impacted. With me is Patrick Ashley, who is the Senior Deputy Director of DC Health, Solana Vanderdat, who is the Director of the Mayor's Office of Nightlife and Culture, and Glendon Hartley, who's the co-owner of Service Bar on U Street. They are with us today because, Glendon is with us today because they actually implemented a vaccine requirement before this actually goes into effect citywide. So we're going to hear a little bit about their experiences. So a couple of things you should know: that if you're on Facebook or on Twitter and you're following this, if you use the hashtag VaxDC, we'll be able to see your comments and your questions and bring you into the conversation that way. At the right time, when you hear us cue the line for questions, or cue the show for questions, I should say, just hit 0 if you're on the phone line, and that will allow you to ask questions of the panelists. So with that, I want to turn to Patrick Ashley to talk to us about the vaccine requirement, again, that goes into effect this Saturday at 6 a.m. So Patrick, I'll look to you.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again for joining us. So as Deputy Mayor Falchicchio mentioned, beginning this Saturday, January 15th at 6 o'clock a.m., there are certain establishments here in the District of Columbia that will require individuals that are 12 years of age or older to have received at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. So our timeline for implementation of this COVID-19 vaccine requirement is, as of this Saturday, if you are 12 years of age and older, you must have had one dose. Again, this Saturday, you must have had one dose if you were age 12 years of age or older. And by February 15th, you must be fully vaccinated for ages 12 and older. And the enforcement of these requirements, again, will begin this Saturday. So no vaccine, there are certain establishments you won't be able to visit. So the locations that this mandate covers, where you're required to have a vaccine, are restaurants, bars, nightclubs, breweries or wineries, seated dining halls, restaurants, cafes, museums, hotels, and other public venues, movie theaters, concert live entertainment venues, sporting venues, gyms, fitness studios, hotel meeting rooms, banquet halls, conference centers, convention centers, auditorium, and any other location determined by the Director of DC Health. This list is not all-inclusive that I just read off. If you visit vaccination.dc.gov, you can see our full guidance document that provides a full listing of all the different establishments that are covered under this requirement. And so again, that's vaxdc.dc.gov. And we'll continue to post updates at that website specifically about how the guidance is implemented and any changes to that guidance. There are some locations throughout the city that are exempt from the vaccine requirement, and that's because we want individuals to be able to still carry on their daily functions. So we have specifically exempted retail establishments, grocery stores, houses of worships, private meeting spaces in office buildings or residential buildings, homeless shelters or other human services facilities, healthcare facilities and pharmacies, gyms and fitness facilities operating for the sole use of individuals residing or working in that specific building. And so those are, for example, gyms that are within apartment buildings, law enforcement buildings, and government offices such as the Department of Motor Vehicles. And it's important to note that we know that in DC we have many shared spaces. And so, for example, if there is an activity that would be prohibited or would be in scope to the vaccine requirement, but being conducted in an exempt location, such as if there was a fitness activity happening at a library, for example, those locations would have to enforce the vaccine requirement. So how do you prove that you are vaccinated? You will, if you are age 12 and older, you will simply need to provide proof of the vaccine, and we'll talk about what that is in a moment. Or if you are 18 years of age and older, you must provide proof of vaccine plus a photo ID that matches that vaccination record. Individuals that are medically exempt or unable to take the vaccine out of a sincerely held religious belief must provide documentation of their exemption, and they must provide a negative PCR or antigen test within the last 24 hours. And that is a test that is taken within the last 24 hours and you have results for, not simply that you got the results within the last 24 hours. So how do you prove that you have been vaccinated? You can provide a copy of your CDC vaccination card that all of you got when you were vaccinated. That can be an original, it can be a photocopy, it can be a digital copy that's on your phone. An immunization record from a healthcare provider, such as your doctor or a public health authority. A COVID-19 verification app, such as VaxYes, Clear, Excelsior, our system here in DC, which is called MyIR, or some other documentation if you were vaccinated overseas through a World Health Organization vaccination record. Individuals or individual organizations may choose to provide a more strict list of what they will accept, and so you'll need to check with that establishment as well. So as we get into the nuances of this, and so acceptable types of photo ID include a state-issued driver's license, passport, DC-1 card, student ID, or permanent resident card. So a little bit of additional guidance here about how you implement this requirement. So businesses must check proof of vaccine at the entry point or first point of contact between the customer and the staff member. And so where we would like this to occur is at the point of entry and where possible before the customer enters. But we recognize that every business has a different setup and is not going to be able to necessarily implement this at the door or outside the door. And so if an individual comes into an establishment without greeting a host, for example, and sits down at a table, we would expect that first point of contact with a staff member is where they are, their vaccine record is checked. If there is a host at that establishment, we would expect that that is the point in which their vaccination record would be checked. The vaccination status must be verified every time the patron enters, unless the vaccination record has been uploaded and linked to a membership that is verified on each entry. So for example, we see many of our gym establishments throughout the community include your vaccination card as a part of the membership, and so that is checked every time that you scan into the gym. We will deploy relevant DC government agencies such as DC Health, ABRA, DCRA to ensure that businesses are implementing this requirement in good faith. And this vaccine requirement currently only applies to patrons. It does not apply to employees of the establishment. And finally, we'll get to signage here. Signage must be displayed at the point of entry of all of the covered entities. You can find these signs at vaccdc.dc.gov. It is required that this is posted at the front door of your establishment. With that, I'll turn it back to John to introduce the next speaker.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. And so we have several hundred folks on the phone line right now. If you want to get in the queue to ask a question, you could press 0 now, and one of our call takers will take your information so that they can get you into the conversation. But with that, I want to bring in Solana, who's been reaching out to businesses and just hear what the Mayor's Office of Nightlife and Culture has been working on. And then, Solana, if you could bring Glendon into the conversation as well.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Solana Vandernat, and I am the director of the Mayor's Office of Nightlife and Culture. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. We are here to acknowledge all the voices that are present. I want to thank Mayor Bowser for her leadership as we continue to navigate through the COVID-19 pandemic. I also want to say thank you to our hospitality and nightlife community for your continued timely efforts to implement the mask mandate and the new vaccine requirement that will go into effect this Saturday. We recognize and understand the many challenges you are facing. Our nightlife and hospitality community is resilient and strong, and we will continue to move forward. As we combat the spread of COVID-19, I want to encourage everyone to get vaccinated and boosted. If you don't feel well, stay home and get tested. Please protect yourself, your staff, patrons, and neighbors. Please continue to utilize all the testing and vaccination options that can be found at coronavirus.dc.gov. Please continue to also check vaccdc.dc.gov for the most up-to-date vaccine requirement guidance and for the downloadable signs. And we will continue to be canvassing the city and will be distributing the signs throughout all 8 wards. The Mayor's Office of Nightlife and Culture is here to serve and assist you. We can be reached at nightlife@dc.gov. I am always a phone call away, and I can be reached directly at 202-430-8528. We thank you for your continued partnership, and we are here to continue to serve and protect our community. Finally, I'd like to remind everybody that Restaurant Week begins this Monday, January 17th. This is an exciting tradition for our city, and we encourage everyone to go and support our local and diverse restaurants. Participating locations can be found at rwdmv.com, as well as many options for everyone to enjoy the Restaurant Week based on your comfort level, such as takeout, delivery, heated outdoor dining, as well as indoor dining. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce Glendon from Service Bar.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So can you please tell us, I understand Service Bar had been implementing your own vaccination requirements prior to the DC government?
Yes, we have. So we felt that it was important to take care of, first off, our community, because we're a community service, exactly, but also our more direct community, which is all of our staff. And we are a smaller venue, so we have access to what each and every opinion in our home, if you will, has. And all of our employees, and as well as myself and my other business partner, we felt that it was important to, first off, keep ourselves safe so that we can, once again, protect the community. So we implemented our vaccination card request a few months ago, maybe 3 months ago. Yeah, and it's been a trial, but all of our guests they feel safer, and so do my staff, and I find it helps provide more direct contact with our patrons, but also an open dialogue for anything health-wise or just community service that's going on.
So, Glendon, paint kind of a vivid picture for us. There are residents watching, but there's also operators watching too.
Yes.
So, if I'm vaccinated, what's my experience when I come to Service Bar as it relates to this requirement?
Okay, so if you are vaccinated, you basically walk up to our doorman who's at the front door. We have a doorman, and we also have a host most days of the week. So what you would do is just show our doorman your cell phone or your direct CDC vaccination card, and we'll let you indoor. If you don't have that vaccination card or any proof of the vaccination, we allow you to sit outdoors on our streetery.
Okay. And so if you're not vaccinated, what have people said, or how have they reacted, or what's been that experience?
Honestly, for the most part, it's been mostly positive. I would say between 75 and 80% of people react very positively to us requiring them to be vaccinated, because they know that it's just to keep them safe. It's not us trying to keep patrons out of our establishment, because that's why we have an establishment in the first place. But we want to keep everyone safe so that they can continue to inhabit our establishment. So it's been a few naysayers here and there, but not so much that we would ever bat an eye at not requiring vaccinations.
Okay. And so I know a lot of folks are worried about the unruly customer, right? The person who maybe has a difference of what the vaccine is and why people are being told to take it, things like that. So the unruly customer, what have you guys experienced with that, and how have you addressed it?
Yeah. So, being a business owner on U Street, we have quite our share of unruly guests at some points, but I would say it hasn't been anything out of the norm. I feel like people just in general are very in tune with what's happening in the country right now, in the world right now, and so it takes a unique person to go against all of the facts that are, vaccination is you're less likely to contract the disease and you're less likely to pass it on to other people. It takes a unique person to go against all those facts and, scientists and other people trying to keep them safe to actually cause a scene. But it's been far and few between. Maybe one person in reality. One person was, a little bit unruly than the rest, but it hasn't really escalated to anything besides that.
Okay. And we're going to take some audience questions in a moment. If you have a question on the phone line, you can press 0. We are getting some questions on social media. I'll take the easy ones, and I'll give the hard ones to Patrick, who's here with us too. But Glendon, my question for you is, so you're the business owner, the team members look to you for leadership. When you said, all right, this is the right thing we need to do, what did the team members say, and how did you kind of talk it through with them? Because now that's happening hundreds and thousands of times around the city this week.
Yeah. So with Service Bar and myself and my business partner being who we are, we've been in restaurants myself for like 19 years now. So I'm very in tune with what my staff has to say and their opinions, because I can only run an establishment with the people that provide the service for my establishment. So with that said, we always take into account the importance of all of our staff members' opinions. And so when we implemented this, it was basically a team vote. We voted. It was unanimous. We were all thinking about doing this, but it's just the fact that we were there to back them up is why they, supported us for so long. We never had to let anyone go during the pandemic, so we actually took a few more people, staff members on, and Service Bar is known as that place where people feel safe, and it's an open venue for if you have opinions, and if you don't feel safe, we make sure that you feel safe. So it was unanimous, and we were just trying to keep everyone safe.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing this. Solana shared her cell phone number. You don't have to do that, but if folks are interested in Service Bar, how do they find you?
You can always reach out to me at Glendon, Glendon, at servicebardc.com. And if you just go to our website, servicebardc.com, you can always reach out to me or one of my staff members directly.
Great. All right. We've got some audience questions. I'm going to go to the social media ones first. Patrick, you ready?
Sure.
All right. Here we go. So this actually is about tests. And I think the question is actually about rapid tests, but I'll ask it as it's typed here for me. But where can our workers get COVID tests in the district if they aren't residents?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have a number of different COVID testing opportunities throughout the city. We have 36 locations that are at rec centers and libraries that offer COVID tests to anyone, regardless. You don't have to show any ID. We also know that many of our neighbors have opportunities as well. Virginia has programs, Maryland has programs, specifically Montgomery County has made some news recently with some of their new testing programs. And so there's tests all around us, but we definitely have a lot of availability here in DC, and you can find that at coronavirus.dc.gov/testing and find those there.
Okay. And this one is from the DC Events Coalition. They asked for special events. Can customers provide proof of vaccination be checked ahead of the event, or must it be when they're entering the venue?
It's a great question. And so if there's a list that they've already, so just like the gyms, for example, if it's attached to their membership and every time that they're coming in, they can see an indicator that says, we've already checked this. They can see Patrick Ashley, he's been vaccinated, that would be okay.
And I've been to a number of events throughout the pandemic, and I know that event organizers have been really strong about saying when an event is vaccine required, that they put that out on every invitation, on every reminder. And I noticed that at check-in, it actually happens pretty quickly. So it's not, hopefully that onus to check isn't too great. So I think, doing it at the event, you're going to have to check something.
Yep.
So good question from the Events Coalition. And then this one, does the vaccine mandate or requirement apply to museums? And I can help you with this one if you'd like. So remember, for museum entrance, it does not apply. However, if there's an activity that's covered, like a theater within the museum, then that does have a vaccine requirement. Or a restaurant that's a sit-down restaurant, you'd also have a vaccine requirement there as well. So for museums, they do have to implement it at those places. The same, it's actually not too dissimilar from a hotel. You don't have to do it necessarily to enter the door of the hotel, but you do need to do it at the hotel restaurant or at the event space for the hotel as well. And then this one is a question I think you covered in the presentation, Patrick, but will MyIR be acceptable form of proof of vaccination? And can you actually tell people about MyIR and how they utilize it?
Sure. So absolutely. So there's a number of different states that have different electronic or what we call digital vaccination records. Here in DC, we have a system called MyIR currently. And we've seen other parts of the country that have their own digital vaccination records. And so those are issued by public health authorities. And so that is a form of identification or vaccination record that you would be able to use, whether that's our tool, that's California's tool, New York City's tool, or using some other type of vaccination verification tool that's very similar to that. Like VaxYes or Clear are examples of that. You can find more information about our tool in DC if you were vaccinated in DC at myir.dc.gov. Again, that's myir.dc.gov. And if you were vaccinated at one of the District of Columbia locations or anywhere inside the District of Columbia, you'll be able to access your digital vaccine record there.
And Zoel, I look to you. So we do have some callers teed up. So let's open up the line for Brielle. Oh, that was social media. I'm sorry. Brielle Davis, asked, are contractors and vendors and partners exempt?
It's a great question, Brielle, and thank you for the question. This is not a requirement for employees. This is a requirement for patrons of the business. And so while we want everyone to be vaccinated, this specific requirement only applies to patrons. It doesn't apply to vendors who would be coming in with supply deliveries or maintenance personnel that would be coming into the restaurant or other establishment. It only applies for patrons.
All right. And then let's go to Greg on the phone line. Greg, can you hear us?
Just a simple question. If you have regulars that you know are ID'd, you've checked them in the past, do you have to go through the physical rechecking when they come in each time?
Thanks for the question, Greg. And so unless there's some sort of record of that, we would want you to check that every time. And so if you're using some sort of check-in system, that would be okay. Otherwise, we would expect, just like ABRA expects to check IDs, we would also want you to check that every time.
And the other thing, too, to keep in mind is that for January 15th, it's one dose. For February 15th, it's the second dose. So you would have to check that
Correct.
As well. So,
correct.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. Lauren, go to you next, Lauren. Lauren.
Hello. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so I had a pretty loaded question. The first question is, how do we expect this to change when the weather changes? For individuals who are unvaccinated and now are expected to sit outside, how does that change for the lovely outdoor community for the vaccinated once the weather changes? The other question I had, should I just wait to ask that one or start with the first one?
So, Glendon had asked it earlier, Patrick, or had talked about it earlier. For folks who are unvaccinated, they've used their outdoor. How does the vaccine requirement utilize outdoor space?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And so we do not, so outdoor eating establishments or outdoor areas are not covered as part of this rule. And so those individuals that may not have had their vaccine in time for this, we still want them to get vaccinated, but they can use those outdoor spaces. They can briefly enter the restaurant solely for the purpose of going to that outdoor area. And so we would want them to be masked as they're going, as we want everyone to be masked right now as they're going to that area, and they would have to stay specifically in that outdoor area and could not come inside except to use the restroom or to leave the premise.
Great. Lauren, did you have another question?
Yeah, the other question is for individuals who are working in these establishments but no longer technically allowed to be inside of other establishments as patrons. Just as someone who's worked in the industry for some time now, a lot of people work in the industry because when they're off, they're enjoying the fruits of their labor in other establishments. So I just don't think that it is quite fair to have people freely working in these environments, unvaccinated, but then they can't go and still be freely within the city as unvaccinated citizens. How do you all see that?
Yeah, Lauren, it's a really good question. I mean, I think, Patrick, I'll look to you too, but I know that part of the reason for this requirement is so that we see more people get vaccinated. One, I think this is also a way for us to mitigate the spread of the vaccine if we know more people are vaccinated, but our hope at the very root of it is that this actually encourages more people to get vaccinated. So Patrick, I'll look to you about that.
Yeah, and
as well.
I want to make sure we want to spread the vaccine, but we don't want to spread the disease. And so we do, so your point there is well taken. But those individuals actually wouldn't be able to patronize other establishments if they're unvaccinated. And so certainly we want employees to get vaccinated. It wasn't covered under these specific requirements. But they would no longer be able to, at the end of their shift, they would no longer be able to stay there as patrons of that establishment, nor would they be able to go anywhere else in the city without having been vaccinated. And so hopefully that also encourages those individuals to get vaccinated.
And just like that camaraderie within the industry, and Glendon, I don't know, or Solana, if you want to talk about this, I don't know, how does that also mean more people will get vaccinated, or how did you have that conversation, maybe Glendon, before you even put the requirement on, about employees and their status?
With my staff, I don't completely know if this is necessarily legal or not, but we require that our staff get vaccinated. We wanted to make sure that all of our staff is safe, and they can't be safe if there are other members of their team that are unvaccinated.
Yeah.
So we actually did, we took it a step further, and we actually sat in a group, and when the phone lines or when the when the sign-ups would open in the morning, we all took turns trying to sign each other up.
Wow.
That's one way we mitigated that situation. I had most of my staff, about 75% of my staff got vaccinated within the first month that the vaccine was available to us.
Yeah.
And so we just required it, and now we require that if you're unvaccinated, that you get vaccinated within 30 days of employment, or we have to terminate the employment.
Wow. And folks know that going into it, so
they know it going
understand.
in.
Yep.
We require vaccination. We want all of our staff to be safe, and the more our staff is safe, the more our customers are safe.
And Solana, how have you kind of heard from operators and folks who work in the industry about having that conversation with colleagues who are not vaccinated about the importance of it?
So the continued message that we've been hearing from our community is that, yes, it's so incredibly important for everybody to be vaccinated. As I mentioned before, it's not just about the staff, it's about protecting and keeping everyone safe, such as the patrons and neighbors as well.
Definitely. All right, let's open up the phone line again. Isabel, can you hear us, Isabel? Your phone line should be open now.
Hi, thank you guys so much for this super informative meeting. I appreciate it. I've got two questions for you guys. The first one is, what will be the fine structure, and how will this be enforced for violations of the vaccine requirement?
Yes, so we are looking to the agencies to come up with their rulemaking for the fines and enforcement. What we have done is worked with our Office of Unified Communications. This is something that the city administrator has worked on since the announcement of the vaccine requirement, so that residents or patrons, if they see a business that's not complying with the vaccine mandate, hasn't implemented the vaccine requirement, what they can do is just call 311, and you don't have to sort through which agency is the right agency for that business. The Office of Unified Communications will sort through that. So all residents have to do, if they see a business that's not implementing the vaccine requirement that is required to, then they can call 311. Not sure if Isabel had a follow-up question. Then we can go to Hollis. Hollis, you're up. Your phone line should be open.
Yes, I think mine was just answered in the previous question in regards to how fining might work. But what I am curious about is, do we have to post the DC sign, or are we able to post our own signs if we've been requiring vaccinations for a while?
So we have this sign at vaccination.dc.gov. What we have done with this sign, and we do ask that you use the sign that is on the website, we even have a QR code on there, so that actually allows for your customers, if they're not aware of the mandate, to be able to quickly get to the vax.dc.gov to make them aware. So right now what we're asking for is for businesses that are required to implement the vaccine requirement, sorry, I'm using the same word twice there, but that they use this sign from DC Health in order for us to be clear about who has to comply. So we are asking folks to utilize the signage at vaxdc.dc.gov. So I think we've gone through the ones that were in the queue from the phone line right now, but we did have some others on social media. And this actually, I think we answered this, Patrick, but are hotel, restaurants, and bars exempt?
Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks for the question. So hotel, restaurants, and bars would be covered under this. The hotel itself is not. But like we talked about before, if it's a activity that's occurring in a exempt facility, but would be covered otherwise, they would be required to. And so a hotel restaurant is no different than any other restaurant in the community, and so we would expect them to enforce the same requirements.
All right, Patrick, another one from social media for you. What about a cafe that offers takeout and indoor dining? Would the requirement apply only to patrons that are dining indoor?
It's a great question, and one that we get frequently. And so individuals can enter the establishment temporarily without being checked for a vaccine or having their vaccination record checked to pick up or place an order. So the individuals that were there dining in the cafe would be subject to this requirement. But if an individual was simply picking up their food or placing an order, they could do that. They would need to leave the premises while they are waiting for the order to be prepared. But otherwise, we would not require them to be their vaccination record checked.
All right. So, Solana, this one's for you. And I know you gave out your contact information previously. Folks might not have been prepared. So I'm getting you prepared now to get your pen or your tablet ready to take down Solana's information. But the question that came in on social media is the district supplying masks for businesses? I know your office has been working with the Office of Community Affairs to get out some signs, masks.
Yes.
How can folks reach out?
Yes, so again, please feel free to email the Mayor's Office of Nightlife and Culture at nightlife@dc.gov. And again, I can be reached directly, and my phone number is 202-430-8528. And again, we will continue to be canvassing the city and distributing signs as well as medical proof masks and the additional guidance that again can be followed and downloadable as well at vaxdc.dc.gov.
And Solana, that's your cell phone number.
Yes.
And so the hours of operation for that?
I mean, I've had 11 years of nightlife experience being in the industry, so I'm used to my phone, going off 24 hours, so.
Well, thank you for your service, Solana.
Absolutely.
Patrick, come back to you about fitness centers in office buildings that are only for use by the building tenant. Do they have to show proof? That was a question that came in on social media.
Yeah, thanks, John. And so fitness facilities in apartment buildings and commercial office space are not required to follow, or not required for individuals to show proof of vaccine. That being said, if for whatever reason they rent out that facility or allow individuals that are not currently residing in or working in that building, they would be subject to the vaccine requirement.
All right, and I have a question on social media that actually is for Patrick and Glendon. But before we do that, I'm going to jump back to the phone lines. For Genevieve, your line should be open. Can you hear us, Genevieve?
Hi, yes, thank you. So I have two questions. I'm here at a restaurant in Penn Corner. I was just wondering, as far as the vaccination for children, it's my understanding that we have to check the IDs, and so what do we do for children? And then also, I've been asked about guests who have put in for an exemption, but it hasn't been processed or approved yet, and they've asked, can they show a PCR test to gain entry? And is there any thoughts on that or policies?
Yep. Patrick, you want to take those two? Thank you, Genevieve.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. And so the vaccine requirement currently applies to individuals ages 12 and older. For those individuals aged 12 to 17, you just simply need to check their vaccine record. There's no requirement to check an ID if they're aged 12 to 17. Individuals over the age of 18 are required to show their vaccination record and an ID. And specifically with regarding the exemption, DC government is not providing exemptions for the general community. They are welcome if they have a medical exemption or a religious exemption, they bring that documentation to the restaurant, but they are required to provide a PCR test or an antigen test that has been taken and resulted within the last 24 hours.
And so if somebody, the question also was about if somebody had applied for an exemption or was putting in for an exemption, I imagine they'd have some record of that as well, right? So they could show that to show that they have a pending exemption, I guess it would be, Patrick?
Correct.
Okay. Let me take this social media question, which, Patrick, how do you spot fake vaccination cards?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that we're particularly concerned about. We don't want restaurants and other establishments that are subject to this vaccination record trying to arbitrate whether or not someone has a valid vaccine record. Instead, we want you to supply that information to coronavirus at dc.gov and just let us know about it so that we can look into it. Many times there's many different forms of vaccination records out there. There's a CDC card. There's been CDC cards that have been replaced, which may have handwriting by one person rather than multiple people. There's many different forms of that. And so so that we don't particularly want to have conflict there about somebody's vaccination record, we'd rather know about that information so that we can look into it after the fact.
And so, Glendon, ask you kind of the same question. Have you seen people with fake vaccine cards, and how have you navigated that? And what have you how have you trained your staff on that scenario?
That's one of the best questions that we've received today. And it's a thing that's been on my mind for a long time now because I have seen fake or falsified vaccination cards before. And, there's really no way we can have a defense against it. But I will say this, one of the things that you just spoke about where, when you go to get your first vaccination, you have handwriting from one person. The next one, you're not necessarily going to be with that same person. So those are more likely to be for what we deem as real vaccination cards. I myself didn't take my vaccination card to my booster shot, and I got a new vaccination card that was fully filled out by that person. So now I know that it is it can be a valid card if you have one person's handwriting on the card. But vice versa, my fiance didn't take her vaccination card to her booster shot, and they didn't provide her with a new one. So it's, as I was saying before, it's kind of like we have no way to defend against that. If they had barcodes, it would be a different story. Also, a lot of labor and work behind that. But I feel like the MyIR and things like that are a big help in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was going to ask too, so how have you kind of navigated this with regulars? And now that, I don't know what you've done before, but if you have to check it each time now, how do you think you'll be able to navigate that with regulars?
Well, I feel like the good and the bad thing about regulars is, they show you who they really are. So if you have a regular that constantly is against vaccinations, you know that person most likely didn't go get that vaccination.
Right.
So when they provide you with a card, it'll be, a different story. But for the most part, our vaccinated regulars, we take them at face value. I know that our regulars are a part of our community just like every other one, every other person that is in our establishment, and I know they care about our community in a certain way. So our regulars, we allow them to just come in freely because we know that they're previously vaccinated. So we haven't been requiring them to show it at the door, but our regulars have been coming to us for 5 years now.
Yeah. Another question comes from social media. This one should be pretty straightforward. Sporting events and those venues, how does this apply to them, Patrick?
Yeah, so if the sporting events are outdoors, there is no vaccine requirement currently. If they are indoors, there would be a requirement for them to be checked.
Okay. And then I'm going to go back to the phone lines in a moment, but another question, and this one, Patrick, may take your crystal ball, but will booster doses be required eventually as part of this vaccine requirement?
It's a great question, and I appreciate talking about the importance of getting vaccinated and the protection that brings to the community, and that's the reason why we are here with this vaccination requirement. Today, the vaccine requirement is only for the full series of vaccine, and so it starts with enforcement of the 1 dose by January 15th, the fully completed series by February 15th. But we have more and more data out there that shows that the best way to keep yourselves out of the hospital and prevent you from dying is to have all your recommended doses, which now includes booster doses for the majority of the population. And so as of today, it does not include that, but stay tuned. We're always interested in protecting the community and protecting our establishments as well.
All right. And let's go to the phone line. Lynn, Lynn, can you hear me? Your phone line should be open now.
Yeah, hi, it's Lynn Stout on behalf of the DC Events Coalition Venue Committee. We have a private venue that doesn't want to allow exemptions. Are they required to accept exemptions?
Yeah, so it is up to the private business who they admit to the business. And so your implementation of it, that part of it would be a business by business decision. So in that vein, they are allowed to do that. And so what we've done, though, is we've got to speak to everybody and to the whole business community. And so that's why we approach this. Patrick, I don't know, we have been in touch with other cities that have implemented this. I wonder on that question or on others, what's sort of the basic feedback? Because we're probably at the leading edge of this among other jurisdictions who are doing it. There's about a dozen or so, I think, that are doing it now, implementing a vaccine requirement. Some have a couple weeks, some have a couple months of experience with it. What's the feedback they've been sharing with you?
Yeah, John, it's a great question, and we're certainly learning from the other cities who have implemented this before us, and just like the cities that follow us are going to learn from us, and we're learning as a community about this. And so we're still figuring out a lot of this, and that's why we're pointing you back to the vaccination.dc.gov as we update our guidance. As John mentioned, businesses are private establishments, and they can, just like the service bar did, they can implement additional requirements on top of these requirements. these are the baseline requirements. And so if businesses want to implement the second dose sooner or boosters or anything like that, they're free to do that as part of their normal business operations. And so we'll continue to evolve the guidance document as we learn from this.
Great. And just want to be clear on that question about whether the business can say they just want to do vaccine card, not exemption. While a business can decide to sort of take it to that next level, the business can't decide to actually not implement the vaccine requirement if they're one of these covered businesses. Correct, Patrick?
Correct. That's correct.
Great. And I know there's some questions, some feedback within the chat. We ask you to please remain civil in the chat as well. And so I want to go to the folks on the panel for kind of their final thoughts. Solana, might as well one more time give out that contact information. I know folks will have follow-up questions. But also, you will notice that we have updated the guidance several times now. So if you look, there's a version that was most recently updated just yesterday on January 10th. So if you go to vax.dc.gov, we will continue to update that, continue to put other tools, get the latest sign, which now has a QR code to help you with that interaction with the patrons who have questions about the vaccine requirement. And Solana, as much as I tease you about giving out your contact information, we were talking about before we actually started this, the feedback and the questions actually are helpful because it helps us to refine the guidance or to update the guidance, to update our FAQs to make sure that we're addressing the concerns that people have. So Solana, just your experience and how folks can reach out to you all and give you that feedback.
So we can be reached again for email purposes, nightlife@dc.gov. My phone number is 202-430-8528. And we are also very active on social media. So please follow us at DCMonk, DCMONC. And we're on social media, Facebook and Instagram. So please feel free to send us a DM or send us a message. And we will also continue to be disseminating the information through our news blasts and e-blasts. So if we have not received your email address, please send that to us, again, at nightlife@dc.gov.
And Solana, you've also been reaching out to some of the business organizations. I know we had Lynn on. You'll be with the events group next week just to talk to them, so folks can reach out to you for that as well.
Yes, absolutely. We are here and excited to continue to have our meet and greets and hear from our community and about how we can be of service and to assist them as we continue to move forward with the vaccine requirement.
Great. And Glendon, parting advice for the businesses. This is everybody's looking to Saturday as something new that they have to implement. I know that the word pivot is overused at this point, but it's yet another pivot. So what should they look to? How to get team members ready? What's your best advice?
Well, if my fellow restaurateurs haven't felt this as of recent, with the new variants, Omicron and so forth, we've seen a pretty good dip in the amount of people that are actually going out to restaurants. And if that's any indicator, this is all for the best. If people knew, when we started this, we weren't, obviously it wasn't a law that was implemented yet. So who's to say that, we weren't just, we implemented this to keep the community safe, but it wasn't a law. And so I want to just, thank the DC government for making this mandatory. That way, it only helps us. We had no real real power in this fight, except the reality that we were trying to keep our guests healthy, and now we have the backing of the government. So it makes it all better.
Thank you, and we definitely will be with you, and definitely appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences with folks, and I think that's one thing we had actually talked about. When the mask mandate went to a mask advisory, that businesses could always implement a little bit further, more stricter guidance to their customers. And The mayor's talked about dialing up and dialing back, and sometimes it's a lot to keep up with. But I think we've also talked about how customers appreciate it, and it's almost at some point amenitizing safety. So they like to see it. So it's good to hear your feedback on that as well.
Thank you.
Great. So Patrick, final thoughts on this, and what should people think about on Saturday, or as they prepare for Saturday to really get ready for implementation?
Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about this. First and foremost, if you're listening and you're not vaccinated, get vaccinated. It's not too late, not only for this requirement, but for your own health and safety. If you have fully completed your vaccines, great job. But remember, you have a booster that's probably due, and so we want you to go and get boosted. That is what we're seeing, that individuals that are ending up in the hospital in ICUs and ventilators and dying are the ones that are unvaccinated. And so it's so important for the community and frankly for yourself to make sure that you get vaccinated. And that's why we're doing this. That's why we're here making sure individuals in the community that are taking part in some of these activities are fully vaccinated. So things to think about as we come into Saturday. One is find your vaccine card. Make sure it's on your phone. Make sure that you have a copy of it. Mine's saved as my phone's background, and so you can either keep a copy of it there, use one of the different applications that are out there. Just make sure you have it and make sure that it's easily accessible. And finally, be patient. We're all in this together. We're doing this for the good of the community. The restaurants and other businesses that are going to be doing this on Saturday, we're all learning in this together. And so bring your patience with you and remember that we're doing this to keep you and the entire community healthy.
Well, Patrick, I appreciate that. Glendon, you're going to have to check with your door people to find out if anybody else has had their vaccine card as their background on their phone. Patrick may be unique in that.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
You don't have to bring it up.
Yeah.
Exactly. But given his work, I actually, just so you know, I use VaxYes. I actually got acquainted with it when I went to the Rammies. They use the technology. It really keeps all the information in one place. Again, this isn't an ad for them, but just knowing that I have it, it's in my wallet, then my electronic wallet on my phone, knowing I have that, then whenever I'm asked, because sometimes you don't even realize it when you were going to an event that they would have it. You always have that with you. So there are many ways to implement this. We really appreciate you all tuning in today. Keep checking out vaxdc.dc.gov. They were asking me to say it is vaxdc.dc.gov. So vaxdc.dc.gov, repeating that over and over again, because that's where we'll list all the information, the guidance, as well as this signage. Look out for our team from the Office of Community Affairs who will be out this week on Thursday to actually disseminate some signage, some mask supply that we have as well. So on behalf of Mayor Bowser, thank you for all the work that you do to keep our city vibrant, to keep our residents employed, and to really make DC what it is. We can't thank you enough for all that you've done. Patrick really said it best, that we're all in this together. We'll get through this together, but we only will do that if we take these important steps, get more of our residents, more of our workers vaccinated, and the vaccine requirement will actually help us do just that. So please feel free to continue to reach out to us. Check out vax.dc.gov, and we appreciate you spending this time with us today. Thank you.